Certainly, the unilateral actions of the U.S. have caused the most tremendous disruption to global trading rules that we've seen in 80 years. But based on the evidence and the fact we have, yes, it has disrupted global trade, but we have found through our analysis that still 72% of world trade, goods trade, is taking place on WTO terms, which means that the global trading system, 72% of it is still based on global rules. So yes, the system has been battered, it's been bent, but there's a stable core that is still resilient.
Do you fear a creeping encroachment that more countries will try to impose, if you will, a unilateral or a bilateral relationship instead of multilateral?
Actually, what we're seeing is the opposite. Suddenly, most WTO members are realizing how valuable the system is. You know, trade was never a sexy topic. Now people are turning around and saying this really matters. We really value predictability and stability for our businesses to trade in.
Are you seeing a rewiring of trade relations?
Absolutely. All our members are doing something we think is very good, which is trying to diversify their markets. We are certainly seeing that. South-South trade is now very important. It was 10% in the 1990s. You know, now it is 25% of total trade. So that is growing. We see all countries making efforts to diversify, and we support it. Richard, there's one thing I do want to say. Some of the criticisms made by the US are valid. We think that this system was made for interdependence, and it has become over-dependent in certain respects. There's over-dependence on the US for markets in some instances, like you just said. There's also over-dependence on China in some instances for critical mineral supplies. We need to diversify and explore other markets, and our members are doing that.
Do you see a role for the WTO?
Absolutely. I just told you we're at the center of world trade. 72% of world trade takes place on WTO terms.
But I worry that, you know the game Jenga, where you pull bits out and eventually the whole thing collapses.
It's not happening. Let me just give you an example. Just recently, last week, a coalition of 14 members led by Singapore, by Iceland, by New Zealand, and by UAE came together, brought together 14 countries and said, look, we are middle powers. We value the system so much.
If we look at the disputes mechanism, which has been well and truly frozen for some years, can you see any way that that unfreezes?
Richard, I have news for you. As we speak, there are 15 cases in front of the dispute settlement system. So this idea that it's frozen, it's not working, is not quite true. The upper body, it's the only court in the world that does trade. Cases on trade globally, the upper body, the appellate body, yes, is paralyzed. But the lower body has been working and has 15 cases, and members are actually being quite creative in the ways that when the panel gives a judgment, then if they want to appeal, instead of appealing, because that will go into the void, they've now developed mechanisms, mediation, arbitration, to try and sort out the cases. And this is what the US was complaining about, that the place had become too litigious and members need to talk more to each other. Well, they're doing it. But look, I want to tell you one thing.
Yes.
There's a place where you have a point. When you say 72%, you know, are you afraid that it might fritter? The fear that I have is that we shouldn't be complacent just because we see a stable core, because we are dealing with uncertainty for the next 3 years. And that means we need to reform. Status quo is not an option. WTO must have deep reforms. And I have a very important thing to tell you.
Please.
Yesterday, China announced that it would no longer have access to the preferences that a developing country member at the WTO has access to. That is big news because it opens the door for reform. China is not saying it's not a developing country. At the WTO, being developing incurs certain privileges.
So they're giving them up.
They are giving up the privileges. They can remain a developing country, that's the name. But the privileges it leads to at the WTO, they are giving up. And I think that's major for the reform because it's one of the things we want to deal with.